The sound of laughter hit me before I even parked. It wasn't the kind of laughter that warms a room or fills it with joy. It was sharp, clipped, the kind meant to cut. I eased my old sedan into the long driveway, its engine coughing as if it, too, dreaded being here. And there they were, my parents standing near the garage, drinks in hand, faces lit up with smug delight as my brother polished the hood of his gleaming new car. A glossy silver Mercedes, still carrying the smell of the dealership, sat like a jewel under the afternoon sun. I pulled up alongside, my car's faded paint and rattling exhaust a cruel contrast, and instantly I felt the burn of their eyes. My mother tilted her head back and laughed, covering her mouth in mock surprise. "Oh dear, she actually drove that thing here," she said loudly enough for me to hear. My father joined in, shaking his head. "I thought junkyards stopped letting people take those death traps out on the road." Heat rose in my chest, but I gripped the steering wheel tighter and forced myself to breathe. I knew better than to react. I had learned long ago that giving them my emotions was like handing them ammunition. I stepped out, straightening my thrift store blazer, brushing off the dust from the drive. My brother leaned casually against his Mercedes, grinning like a prince waiting for his coronation. "Nice ride, sis," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "What is it now, a 09? Must be vintage by now." My parents laughed again, their voices echoing against the brick walls of the house they never let me call home. "My name is Julia Hart. I'm 32 years old. To the world outside, I'm quiet, maybe even reserved. But beneath that calm exterior is a resilience forged in the furnace of neglect. Every scar, every slight, every mocking glance shaped me. And as I stood there in that driveway, their laughter bouncing off the walls, I knew I was standing in the same battlefield where my childhood had always played out, their favoritism on one side, my silence on the other. From as far back as I can remember, I was the shadow in my family. My brother, Mark, was the golden child, the prodigy, the star, the one they boasted about at dinner parties. He was showered with new toys, expensive lessons, and constant praise. I, on the other hand, was the afterthought. Birthdays came and went with second-hand gifts, my accomplishments dismissed as cute, or not quite enough. I can still recall one Christmas morning when I was 10. Mark unwrapped a brand new mountain bike, its red frame shining under the tree lights, while I was handed a set of coloring books. I loved drawing, but I knew in that moment what mattered to them. His gift was displayed, mine shoved aside. My mother hugged him tightly, tears in her eyes as she declared how proud she was. She barely looked at me. That pattern never changed. In school, when I earned straight A's, my father muttered that grades meant nothing compared to real talent like Mark's ability to charm a crowd. When I got into a good college, they shrugged, saying it was only natural since Mark had already paved the way by attending a more prestigious one. Every step I took forward was measured against him, and every time I came up short in their eyes. By the time I was an adult, I had stopped trying to compete. Their love was a prize I was never meant to win. Instead, I built walls around myself, teaching my heart to beat steadily even when it felt invisible. I worked, saved, and lived quietly, learning that survival sometimes meant keeping your victories private. But none of that mattered to them. In their eyes, I was the failure, the sibling who didn't measure up. That afternoon in the driveway was just another chapter in the same cruel book. As I walked toward the house, my heels clicking against the stone path, I heard my mother whisper, though it was meant for me to hear. "Why does she even bother showing up? She knows she doesn't belong in this family." My father smirked. "Maybe she wants to feel important for once. Poor thing." Mark chuckled, swinging his car keys around his finger like a trophy. "She'll never get it. Some people are just destined to be background characters." Their words were arrows, but my skin had grown thick from years of being their target. I kept walking, head high, refusing to let them see the sting. Yet inside, a familiar ache bloomed. That small child in me, the one who used to crave their approval, still stirred. She wanted to scream, to ask why love had always been conditional, why she was never enough. But the woman I had become held her back, silenced her cries. When I reached the porch, my mother blocked the doorway with a delicate smile that felt more like a sneer. "Julia, dear," she said, her voice sweet with venom, "why don't you do us all a favor and park that thing around the corner? We don't want the neighbors thinking we let junk clutter our driveway. It's embarrassing." Her words hit like a slap, sharper than the autumn wind. My father nodded in agreement, his eyes cold. "Yes, Julia. We have guests coming tonight, important people. The last thing we need is them thinking we allow mediocrity into the family. Please, just go." For a moment, I stood frozen. I had expected mockery, but the outright dismissal still cut deep. I looked past them at the house. The manicured lawn, the polished windows, the life I was always kept at arm's length from. And then at my brother's car, shining under their proud gazes like a crown jewel. Something inside me hardened. They wanted me gone because my presence embarrassed them. They saw me as pathetic, a burden, a blemish on their perfect facade. I forced a small smile, though my chest ached with the weight of their cruelty. "Of course," I said softly. "Wouldn't want to ruin the picture." I turned back toward my car, their laughter trailing behind me like chains. Every step I took felt heavier, but somewhere deep inside, a spark lit. They thought they had stripped me of dignity. They thought I had nothing to show. What they didn't know, what none of them had ever cared to see, was that I was no longer the invisible child they had raised. I slid back into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, my heart pounding not with shame but with resolve. Someday soon, their laughter would turn to silence. Someday, the daughter they dismissed as pathetic would stand taller than they ever imagined. For now, though, I drove away quietly, the engine sputtering as if in solidarity, leaving their mocking faces behind. They had cast me out again. But little did they know, I was no longer the one standing on the outside. They were. I sometimes wonder if I ever really had a childhood, or if mine was simply a long apprenticeship in invisibility. Looking back, the earliest memories I can summon are not of laughter or warmth, but of comparison, of always being measured against someone who, in my parents' eyes, could do no wrong. Mark, my older brother by 3 years, was the sun. I was expected to orbit quietly around him, never casting a shadow. When he spoke, people listened. When he failed, excuses were made. And when he succeeded, the house erupted in praise. Me. I was the background noise, the afterthought, the one who blended into the wallpaper. I can still see the scene when I was 6 years old, sitting cross-legged on the living room carpet with a doll I had patched together from scraps of fabric. I had stitched her hair from yarn and drawn her face with a marker I'd found in a kitchen drawer. To me, she was beautiful. I held her up to show my mother, pride glowing in my small chest. She barely looked before waving me off. "That's nice, Julia. Now move aside. Your brother has something important to show us." Mark bounded into the room with a brand new toy robot, its chrome arms glinting. My father clapped him on the shoulder, beaming. "That's my boy. Look at this marvelous thing." I remember sitting quietly, the doll clutched against my chest, realizing no one had even asked me her name. That was the rhythm of our home. My clothes were hand-me-downs, often too big or frayed at the seams, while Mark's wardrobe overflowed with crisp new shirts and polished shoes. Birthdays told the same story. On his 16th, he received the keys to his first car, a brand new convertible, gleaming red under the driveway lights. When I turned 16, I got a used bicycle and a speech about learning the value of humility. Everywhere I turned, the message was clear: I was less deserving, less important, less worthy of love. The comparisons didn't stop at gifts. They bled into every part of my life. In school, I poured myself into studying. My notebooks were filled with neat lines of equations, essays carefully crafted, assignments turned in early. When I proudly handed over my report card, straight A's gleaming across the page, my father barely glanced before muttering, "That's expected of you." But when Mark brought home a B+ in math, the house erupted in celebration. My mother baked his favorite cake. My father declared, "That's effort, that's progress." I sat silently at the table, my achievements invisible beneath the shadow of their golden child. The cruelest part wasn't just the favoritism. It was the way they twisted my efforts into burdens. If Mark wanted piano lessons, they found the best teacher in town. When I asked for art supplies, my mother frowned. "Do you think money grows on trees? Why waste it on your silly hobbies?" So I stopped asking. I stopped expecting. I taught myself how to draw in the margins of old notebooks. I read books borrowed from the library instead of buying them. And in silence, I learned a lesson that would shape my entire life. Never let them see your real achievements. Because the moment they saw them, they would either diminish them or twist them into something ugly. I remember one night when I was 13. I had secretly entered a short story competition at school. I spent weeks writing, pouring my heart into every word, and when I won second place, the certificate felt like gold in my hands. I brought it home, trembling with excitement. My father looked at it, chuckled, and said, "Second place, so you weren't good enough for first. Figures." My mother didn't even bother to respond. That night, I folded the certificate and tucked it into the back of my drawer. I never showed them anything again. The emotional wounds cut deeper than I admitted at the time. I grew up believing that love had to be earned, that worthiness was conditional. Every smile I gave was a plea, every achievement a desperate attempt to be noticed, and every dismissal etched another scar on my heart. But alongside the hurt, something else grew, resilience. Loneliness became my teacher. I learned to cook for myself when my parents forgot my dinner. I learned to budget the few dollars. I earned babysitting while Mark was handed 20s without asking. I learned to depend on no one but myself. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling of my bedroom, vowing that one day I would escape. I didn't know how or when, but I knew I would never let their cruelty define the rest of my life. In a twisted way, their neglect became my fuel. Each insult was a spark. Each rejection was kindling. Deep inside, I built a fire no one else could see, a fire that told me one day, "You will prove them wrong." Of course, back then, they couldn't have imagined it. To them, I was the obedient daughter, the one who carried trays at family gatherings, the one who cleaned up after Mark's parties, the one who nodded silently whenever they dismissed my ideas. They mistook silence for weakness, not realizing that silence can also be armor. Even now, as an adult, they still see me that way. At dinners, they expect me to fetch drinks, to smile politely while Mark brags about his latest venture. They talk over me, laugh at me, and remind me, without ever saying the words, that in their eyes, I am meant to serve, never to shine. But what they don't know is that the little girl who once hid her drawings, who folded away her certificate, grew into a woman who learned how to hide something far greater. Because hiding was survival, and survival taught me patience, and patience, as they are about to learn, can turn into the sweetest kind of justice. For years, I let them think I was small, powerless, dependent. I let them mock my old car, sneer at my simple clothes, treat me like the family's unwanted shadow. And all the while, I carried a secret so big it could shatter their illusion of superiority in an instant. But I wasn't ready to show them yet. Not then. Instead, I stayed quiet, letting them bask in their illusions, letting them believe they had stripped me of dignity. Because the longer they underestimated me, the sweeter it would be when the truth came crashing down. And if there was one thing I had learned from a lifetime of neglect, it was this: when you've been overlooked long enough, the moment you step into the light is blinding. Not just for you, but for everyone who never thought you'd rise. The dining room table was set like it always was when my parents hosted one of their perfect family dinners. Polished silverware, crystal glasses, and an absurdly large floral centerpiece that blocked half the conversation. The roast sat steaming at the center, surrounded by overcooked vegetables and forced smiles. Mark was already seated at the far end, his sleeves rolled up just enough to flash the new gold watch hugging his wrist. Another gift from our parents, I was sure. I slid into my usual seat, the one closest to the kitchen door, always one motion away from being told to fetch something. The family hierarchy hadn't shifted in decades. Mark, the prince, sat tall in his throne. I was the servant in disguise. As I reached for the water pitcher, my mother's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Did you manage to get that old car of yours up the hill, Julia? Or did you have to push it the last few feet?" My hand froze mid-pour. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was expectant. They were waiting for my reaction, hoping for it. Mark chuckled. "Honestly, Mom, I'm amazed it still runs." Cars that old belong in a museum or a junkyard, not a driveway. I set the pitcher down slowly. "It runs just fine," I said quietly. My father scoffed. "You know, Julia, appearances matter. When your brother pulls up in something respectable, people take him seriously. You, on the other hand, you just remind everyone how some people never quite get it together." There it was. That old familiar burn behind my eyes, the one I'd learned not to let spill over. I blinked once, then again, steadying myself. This wasn't new, but something about tonight, the smugness, the way they all looked at me like I was a stray they forgot to leave outside, was making the fire harder to contain. Then came the real reason for the dinner. "So," Mark said, wiping his mouth with a cloth napkin, "I found the place. It's a stunning home, 6 bedrooms, pool, full smart system, perfect for expanding my business." "Not to mention future grandkids," my mother added, beaming at him. My father leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "And we've been talking, Julia. Your brother needs help with the down payment. We figured it's only fair you contribute." My fork paused halfway to my mouth. "I'm sorry." "You live alone," my mother said. "No kids, no husband, you don't need much. Meanwhile, Mark's building a future for the family. You could at least support that." I looked between them, stunned. "You're asking me to give money to Mark? For a house?" My brother shrugged, as if this were all normal. "It's not like you've done much else. We just figured it was time you gave back to the family." I set my fork down carefully, each movement deliberate because my hands were shaking now, and I refused to let them see. "Give back?" I asked. "You wouldn't be where you are without us," my father said, his voice hardening. "We put a roof over your head, fed you, clothed you. Don't act like we owe you something." I swallowed, tasting metal. "You mean like how you paid for Mark's college but made me take out loans?" "That was different," my mother snapped. "He had a future. He needed investment." "And I didn't." They stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Mark chuckled. "Come on, Jules, you weren't exactly CEO material." The room went quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a crack of thunder. I stood up slowly, napkin still clenched in my hand. "I'm not giving you a cent." My father's face turned red. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said, voice steady now. "I'm not giving Mark anything." "You ungrateful little." He slammed his hand on the table, the silverware clattering. "After everything we've done for you, you have the nerve to sit there and act superior." I didn't flinch. "You haven't done anything for me. You did everything to me. You made it very clear from the beginning that I was never going to be enough. So don't pretend now that this is about family. This is about control." Mark stood too. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," I said. "I'm being honest, something this family has never respected from me." My father's voice dropped into a low growl. "You're useless." "Always have been, just taking up space." There it was, the word he'd used since I was a teenager. Useless. It had been a joke to him, a label to dismiss me. But tonight it landed like a final nail in a coffin I refused to lie down in. I breathed in through my nose. Calm, always calm. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I smiled. Not because anything was funny, but because in that moment, I realized something vital. I didn't need them. I didn't need their validation, their money, their staged affection. I had outgrown this table, this house, this charade of family, and they had no idea what I had become while they were busy mocking me behind champagne glasses. I walked to the door. My mother sputtered, "Where are you going?" "I've had enough," I said. "I won't sit at a table where I'm only welcome when I'm silent or useful to someone else." "You walk out that door, don't expect to be part of this family anymore," my father shouted after me. I turned, hand on the doorknob. "I stopped being part of this family a long time ago. You just never noticed." And then I left. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream or break down. I just drove. The streetlights passed above like slow, blinking reminders that I was still moving forward, even if it hurt. That night, something shifted inside me. For years, I'd tried to show them pieces of myself, soft, sincere pieces, hoping they'd see me, value me. But those pieces were never enough, so I decided I would stop explaining, stop offering, stop playing a role in their illusion of superiority. They didn't deserve to know what I'd built. They didn't deserve to know what was coming. From now on, my silence would be intentional. My calm would be my armor, and one day they would realize what they had mocked, and it would be too late. They think I drove home in shame that night, that I cried, that their words sunk into my bones the way they used to when I was a child. But that's the thing about people who have only ever known your silence. They assume it means defeat. What they don't know is that the moment I turned the ignition, I wasn't heading back to a sad little apartment or a life of barely getting by. I was going home. Not the kind of home they could imagine. Not the peeling one-bedroom they think I rent above a laundromat. Not the worn-out shoes and discount brand groceries they believe define my reality. No, I was driving toward the life they never thought I'd be capable of. I took the long way that night, windows down, letting the wind calm the fury still simmering in my chest. My old sedan, faithful as ever, rumbled beneath me, not because it was all I had, but because it served its purpose. Because the real car, the one they've never seen, was parked behind reinforced steel gates on the other side of town. A 2023 Lamborghini Huracan. Sleek. Matte black. Custom red interior. Every time I sit behind the wheel, it purrs like it knows it's not just a car, it's a trophy, one I earned in silence. My mansion sits high on a private hill, shielded by towering evergreens and a coated iron gate. A long cobblestone driveway curls up to a modern estate with floor-to-ceiling windows and warm lights that spill across marble floors. It's the kind of house my mother would have drooled over at open houses just for the thrill of dreaming. The kind my father would have claimed was wasted on a woman. But it's mine. Every inch, paid for in full. No loans. No co-signers. No help. I pulled through the gates that night, watching them close behind me like a theater curtain falling on the final act of the life they think I still live. Inside, the silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was earned. I slipped off my shoes and walked through the foyer, past the glass art piece I'd commissioned from a rising sculptor in Paris. My reflection followed me across polished wood floors and up the stairs to my office, the heart of everything I'd built. This business, this empire, it didn't start big. It started the way most things in my life did, quietly, unnoticed. When I graduated college, with loans Mark never had to worry about, I worked 3 jobs. Admin assistant by day, copywriting gigs at night. On weekends, I sold handmade planners and journals on Etsy just to scrape together extra income. While Mark was finding himself in Europe on my parents' dime, I was eating instant noodles and washing my work blouse in the sink. But I was watching, learning, saving. In time, I realized the key wasn't just working hard, it was making my money work for me, so I studied. Every night after my shifts ended, I devoured books on investing, watched online seminars, learned everything I could about e-commerce, branding, and digital marketing. I took courses I couldn't afford, maxed out credit cards I paid off 2 months later, and poured every spare sent into the business I was building behind the scenes. I launched my first product line under a fake name. Didn't want anyone tracing it back to me. It flopped. I cried, sure, but I didn't stop. The second one did better. The third exploded. Today, that online store has evolved into a global lifestyle brand. 6 full-time employees, multiple warehouse partners, licensing deals, passive income streams. And not once, not a single time did I tell my family, because I didn't want their hands on it, or their praise, or their poison. They never asked how I was doing, only if I could help with something or show up somewhere. They weren't interested in my life unless it could serve theirs. So I let them believe I was small, that I was struggling. My best friend, Tasha, is the only one who's ever seen it all. We met when we were both temping at the same soulless corporate office. She was bright, blunt, and had a laugh like she didn't care who was listening. Where I was reserved, she was a firecracker, and she saw through me from the first week. "You're not meant to be someone's assistant, Julia," she told me once. "You walk like someone who's building something they're afraid to speak out loud." She was right, and she never once asked to take from it. She only poured into it. Tasha helped me name my brand. She helped me build the website, design the packaging, cheer through every milestone. When I got my first 6-figure payout, she screamed louder than I did. "You're gonna blow their minds one day," she grinned. I remember smiling back then and saying, "I don't want to blow their minds. I want to bury their doubt." And I meant it, because this wasn't just about money. This was about control, about reclaiming the version of myself they tried to erase. And so I waited. I let the Lamborghini rest behind private walls. I kept the mansion tucked into the trees. I kept my brand name far from my own, because the most powerful kind of revenge isn't loud. It's silent, steady, patient. It's showing up to a dinner where they expect you to beg, and instead letting them speak into your silence while you smile, knowing you could buy the table they sit at 10 times over. They think they know me. The quiet daughter, the failure, the invisible one. What they don't realize is that I've spent the last decade building an empire while they were too busy laughing. And now I'm just waiting for the right moment to let the truth step into the light. Not for applause, not for vindication, but because I want them to see it, to choke on their own certainty. That moment is coming, I can feel it. And when it does, I won't raise my voice, I won't shout or explain. I'll just open the gates. It started with a voicemail I didn't expect. My phone lit up one morning with a message from my mother, her voice tight and irritated, the usual mask of politeness just barely hanging on. "Julia, your father and I are in a bit of a bind. The car broke down on the way to a benefit dinner, very important people, mind you, and Mark's out of town. We're stranded near the Civic Center. I know you're probably not busy, so come get us. Please." No apology, no warmth, just an expectation, just a command. The old me, the girl they used to control with guilt and silence, might have rushed out the door, desperate to be useful. But that version of me no longer lived here. Still, I went, not for them. For the moment I'd been waiting for, I grabbed my keys, not to the Lamborghini, not yet. I chose the old sedan they loved to mock. The one with the faded paint and stubborn air conditioning. It rattled a little when it started, like a tired dog stretching its limbs, and it was perfect. When I pulled up, I spotted them immediately, standing on the sidewalk in the hot afternoon sun, my father waving his arms in frustration while my mother scrolled furiously on her phone. They didn't see me at first. They were too busy arguing. I stopped a few feet away and rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" My mother's face tightened. "Finally!" My father didn't even respond, just yanked the door open and climbed in like I was his chauffeur. The same man who once said I was too useless to own anything of value was now sweating through his pressed shirt in the passenger seat of the car he never missed a chance to insult. My mother slid into the back, carefully brushing crumbs from the seat before sitting down like royalty boarding a donkey. "This car," she muttered, "smells like a thrift store." I said nothing. My father sighed. "Do you ever think about upgrading? It's humiliating to be seen in this." "It gets me where I need to go," I said calmly, eyes on the road. "Barely," he snapped. You know, Julia, appearances matter. People judge you based on things like this. Mark understands that. I kept driving. They filled the silence with complaints. The heat, the seats, the noise of the engine. My mother pulled down the visor and frowned at her reflection. My makeup is melting. What kind of daughter lets her parents suffer like this? The irony nearly made me laugh, but I didn't. Not yet. We approached the main boulevard. Wide streets lined with shops, cafes, and sleek restaurants where the city's elite came to parade their wealth. We were only a few blocks from my neighborhood. The stoplight turned red, and I rolled to a slow, steady halt. And then it happened. From the corner of my eye, I saw it pull up beside us. Low, black, gleaming in the sun like a panther ready to pounce. The Lamborghini. My Lamborghini. Driven by Tasha, who had borrowed it that day to pick up a client. She knew I might be in this part of town, and her timing, whether divine or accidental, could not have been better. My parents' conversation faltered. My father turned to look. His eyes squinted. "Now that's a car," he muttered. My mother added. "Whoever owns that must be someone important." Real success, not just pretend ambition. Tasha glanced over, sunglasses low on her nose, a slight smirk curling her lips. Then she waved, not at them, at me. My father blinked. Did she just wave at you?" I shrugged, letting the silence fill with their confusion. Then, to their growing horror, the valet from my private neighborhood, dressed in full uniform, stepped out from the corner of the parking garage. He smiled, recognized me immediately, and gave a sharp nod. "Miss Hart, lovely to see you. Will you be needing us to prep the gates this evening?" My mother froze. "Miss Hart." The light turned green. I drove on. Their silence was sudden, sharp, like air sucked from a room. For once, I didn't rush to fill it. They exchanged glances, uncertain, jittery. My father cleared his throat. "Do you know that man?" "I might," I said, tone neutral. My mother leaned forward slightly. "Where exactly do you live again, Julia?" "Uptown," I replied casually, turning down the road that curved around the hill, the one that led to the gated neighborhood no one entered without a code or an invitation. Their posture shifted. My mother straightened. My father rubbed his hands together as if trying to make sense of a puzzle missing all its edges. "You said you rent, right?" my mother asked. "Did I?" I tilted my head. "Must have been a while ago." My father squinted. "What do you do, Julia?" I smiled faintly. "A little bit of this, a little bit of that." Their discomfort was now palpable. They looked at me differently, for the first time not through a lens of superiority, but curiosity. Fear. They couldn't place me anymore, and that was the point. We drove the rest of the way in silence, my old car humming steadily along the rich stretch of town they never thought I'd belong to. I didn't take them to my house. I dropped them at the event like they asked. But I didn't say goodbye, just a calm, collected, "Have a good evening." They stepped out slowly, stiffly. My father looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. My mother stared at me through the window like she was seeing a ghost. I pulled away before they could gather their thoughts. In the rearview mirror, I saw them still standing there, silent, stunned, wondering. I didn't need to tell them the truth that day. The best part was letting it simmer. Letting them sit in that car, realizing they had belittled someone they never really knew. That was the day the balance shifted. The day the daughter they dismissed began to eclipse the illusions they clung to, and I had no intention of stopping there. The next time they called, their tone had changed, subtle but undeniable. "Julia," my mother said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Your father and I were just talking about how long it's been since we all spent real time together. Not just, running errands or quick visits." Quick visits. That's what they were calling the ride they'd begged for. The one where they'd mocked my car right up until they saw the valet call me Miss Hart. I said nothing. She cleared her throat. "We were thinking maybe you could come by this weekend. Bring your friend, the one with the Lamborghini. We could do dinner." "Busy," I said simply. "I'm driving out that way anyway, uptown, but I won't have time to stay." "Oh," she chirped, pretending like that didn't sting. "Well, maybe we'll see you in passing." And so I made sure they did. I arranged it so perfectly, it almost felt poetic. That Sunday, I offered to give them a lift from brunch. Just a small detour, I said casually. Need to pick something up from a property I manage. They got in without question, not even bothering to comment on the car this time. As we drove, the city shifted. Stores became boutiques. Houses became estates. The pavement turned smoother. Trees lined the road like sentinels guarding something sacred. My mother leaned forward. This is a lovely neighborhood. Who lives around here? People who know the value of keeping their mouths shut and their heads down, I murmured. We curved around a wooded bend, and then it appeared, my home. Modern architecture blended with nature, glass and stone coexisting in perfect harmony. The driveway stretched wide and welcoming. A series of tiered gardens flanked the entrance. The wrought iron gate stood tall and still. Behind them, the house glowed like a secret finally stepping into the light. My father sat up straighter. This place is incredible. Whose house is that? I turned the wheel smoothly and pulled up to the keypad beside the gate, typed in the code. The gates began to open. My mother gasped. Wait, Julia, what are you doing? Like I said, I replied, voice even. Picking something up. The car rolled past the threshold. I watched their heads pivot like bobbleheads, taking in every corner of a life they'd never imagined I could own. My father glanced at me, eyes wide. You work here. I parked, got out, and opened the passenger door with the same care I used to set the dinner table as a child, meticulous, quiet, invisible. They stepped out slowly, disoriented. Like tourists waking up in a foreign country without a map, my mother's voice cracked. Julia, whose house is this? I met her gaze calmly. Mine. Silence. You could hear the birds, the wind, the soft hum of the electric fence. Then, what? This is my house, I repeated. I bought it 3 years ago, designed it myself. The business I run, the one you never cared to ask about, built this. My father blinked like he'd been slapped. That's impossible. You drive a wreck. Because you never would have respected me if I didn't. They didn't know how to respond. Their mouths moved, but no sound followed. I continued. I built this without a cent from either of you. No loans, no handouts, no apologies, every square foot, mine. My mother finally found her voice. Why didn't you ever tell us? Because you didn't ask. You never saw me as someone worth asking. She stepped forward, reaching slightly, like touching the air near the walls might tether her to this reality. But we're so proud of you, sweetheart. Truly, we always knew you had potential. Lies. They came out smooth and practiced, like the ones they used to offer at dinner parties when people asked what I did. She's figuring it out, they'd say, smiling with tight lips. A late bloomer. Now they wanted to rewrite the script. My father cleared his throat. Look, maybe we made mistakes, all right. Maybe we were hard on you, but this is incredible. You should have brought us sooner. He laughed, hollow and forced. You know what they say, family's everything. I turned toward the house. The lights inside glowed warmly, spilling across marble floors and high ceilings. Home, mine. You really want to come in? I asked softly. They both nodded, almost in unison. I just want to see the inside, my mother pleaded. Just for a moment. I walked to the gate's panel, pressed the intercom, and let the gate slide shut behind them again. My parents watched, confused, as I stayed outside with them. I didn't open the door. I didn't move toward the house. Instead, I turned and looked them dead in the eyes. You never opened your doors for me, I said, voice low but unwavering. So mine stay closed for you. My mother blinked. Julia. All those years you left me outside, I continued. All the holidays where I watched you dote on Mark. All the times you told me to park around the corner so I wouldn't embarrass the family. You trained me well. My father's jaw clenched. Don't be petty, we're your parents. You were never parents to me, you were critics, judges, spectators. They stood on my driveway like exiles. For once, I was the one with the gate, and I didn't open it. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity, because the truth was this, they didn't want me. They wanted proximity to power. They wanted the comfort of claiming me when it was convenient. Now that I had something they could be proud of, they wanted to share. But they had lost the right to stand inside my walls. I walked them back to the car, opened the door for them again. The same old sedan they once laughed at, now transformed into a throne of quiet vengeance. We'll be going now, I said calmly. "I've got real guests coming." They slid into the car, stunned. My mother stared out the window. My father said nothing. As I drove them back down the hill, they didn't speak once. They didn't ask questions. They didn't mock. They just sat there, the silence pressing against them like the weight of every year they'd ignored me. And when I dropped them off, I didn't look back. Because they were no longer the center of my story. They were just the footnotes. The calls started the next morning, voicemail after voicemail, my mother's voice soft, trembling, sweetened with a kind of affection she'd never used with me before. "Julia, sweetheart, we were just overwhelmed yesterday. Everything was so surprising, but we're just so proud of you. Truly." Click. Then another. "Your father and I were thinking maybe we could come by next weekend. Just for lunch. You don't even have to cook. We'll bring something. Your favorite." I didn't respond. Not to the calls, not to the texts. Not even when my brother messaged me for the first time in months. "Mark, Mom's crying. You've made your point. Can you stop being dramatic now?" I smiled when I read that. He still didn't get it. None of them did. They thought this was a tantrum, a performance, that I was hurt because of one dinner or one comment or one ride in an old car. They had no idea they were standing at the edge of a canyon they'd spent decades digging with every insult, every dismissal, every cold shoulder. And now they wanted to cross it with a text message and a box of pastries. It didn't stop there. One afternoon, I found my mother waiting outside my gate. She wore pearls and a smile like armor. When the security intercom buzzed, I watched her on the camera feed. "Julia, darling, I was in the area. Just thought I'd drop off some homemade jam. You used to love this as a girl, remember?" She held up a mason jar like it was a peace treaty. I didn't answer. After a while, she set it down on the stone ledge and walked away, her posture stiff, rehearsed. A week later, my father showed up instead. No jam, just silence. He stood outside the gate, staring up at the house, hands in his pockets like a man scoping out a museum he couldn't afford to enter. They came again, and again, sometimes together, sometimes apart. Their messages shifted from pride to guilt to flattery. They told me they were wrong, that they saw me now, that they'd always believed in me, even when they didn't show it. But I knew better. Love that only surfaces when the mansion appears isn't love, it's proximity hunger, and I wasn't starving anymore. Still, their persistence tugged at something inside me, not weakness, not regret, just memory. The ache of a little girl who once begged them to stay and watch her school recital. The teenager who stayed up late making her own birthday cake because no one remembered. The young woman who sat in the back row at Mark's graduation while her own was skipped over. That girl still lived in me. And sometimes she whispered, maybe they've changed. Maybe they mean it now. But every time I let the thought linger, it unraveled quickly, because I remembered what it felt like to be useful but unloved. Needed but never valued. They didn't want me. They wanted the version of me that made them look good. The one they could parade at brunches, brag about at galas, use as proof that they were never cruel, just tough love parents. I wasn't going to give them that redemption arc, so I agreed to meet them. Once, in public, neutral ground. A quiet cafe in the center of town, far from my neighborhood, far from their country club. I wore soft clothes, no makeup, no jewelry, no signs of wealth. I wanted them to face me, not the fantasy they were now so desperate to embrace. When I arrived, they were already seated. My mother stood too quickly, arms wide like she'd just spotted a long-lost friend. "Julia," she gasped. "You look wonderful." My father followed suit. "Kiddo, glad you made it." I sat down without hugging either of them. There was a long silence. Then my mother leaned in, smiling too brightly. "Listen, honey, your father and I have been talking. We'd really love to reconnect, start fresh. Forget the past, maybe." My father nodded. "Clean slate, that's what families do." Families. That word hung in the air like perfume in a funeral parlor, sweet but sickening. "You weren't interested in reconnecting when I graduated alone," I said quietly. "Or when I asked you for help with my first apartment." My mother flinched. "We didn't know then what you were going through." "No," I said. "You didn't care to ask." Mark arrived 10 minutes later, sunglasses on, a smirk already pulling at his mouth like he was walking into a business deal. Well, well, look who finally decided to level up, he said, sliding into the booth. You really had us fooled with that pathetic car. I didn't blink. It's not hard to fool people who aren't paying attention, he frowned. Look, I'm just saying you've got something good going now, and family sticks together, right? I mean, maybe we could work something out, partner up. I've got business ideas. Of course he did. I'm not here for that, I said. Then why are you here? My father snapped. I turned to him. To tell you something, one last time. They all fell quiet. I took a slow breath, not because I needed to, but because I wanted this moment to land exactly where it needed to. You taught me something, I said. That family isn't inherited. It's chosen. And you don't get to call yourself my family just because we share blood. Family is who shows up when you're small, not just when you're successful. My mother opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. No more pretending. You ignored me when I needed you, mocked me when I came to you vulnerable. You looked me in the eyes and called me useless. And now that you see what I've built, you want in. But this life, the one I built brick by brick while you laughed behind closed doors, it has no space for people who only love the final product. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Calm cuts deeper than anger. Mark scoffed. You're seriously gonna sit there like some self-righteous? Yes, I said. I am. My mother's eyes filled with tears. But we're your parents. You were my critics, I corrected. And you still are. You just want a front row seat now that the show's worth watching. I stood. The table sat frozen. 3 people who had once controlled every corner of my life, now silenced by the version of me they never believed in. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just walking away without needing to explain yourself ever again. And that's exactly what I did. There's a certain kind of silence that feels like a reward, not the silence of being ignored or overlooked or belittled. I lived in that kind for most of my life. No, this silence is different. This one lives in the way the wind rustles the leaves in my garden as the sun sets behind the trees. It lives in the steam curling above my cup of tea as I sit on the stone balcony, overlooking the hills. It lives in the hush of a home that holds peace instead of tension. It's the sound of being free. I didn't always know what that would feel like. For years, I thought freedom would be escape. Distance. A new zip code. A locked door. But freedom isn't about leaving people behind. It's about releasing the weight they put on you and no longer needing their permission to breathe. For a long time, I carried their voices inside me. My father's disdain. My mother's cold judgment. Mark's smug superiority. Even when I walked away physically, they echoed in my mind, questioning every success, dimming every light I tried to shine. But slowly, brick by brick, I built something stronger. Not just the mansion, not just the business. I built a self that didn't flinch anymore. It's funny, in a way. I used to dream of moments like this, moments where they'd come crawling back, begging to be part of my life, eyes wide with regret. I imagined what I'd say, how I'd make them feel the way they made me feel. But when the time came, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to scream or slam doors or get even, because the real justice was quiet. It was in the way my mother blinked back tears outside the gates she would never walk through. In the way my father sat silent in my passenger seat, realizing he no longer had any power over the girl he once called useless. It was in Mark's clenched jaw when I refused to partner with him. In his silence when he realized he was no longer the center of the story. They taught me that love could be conditional. But they also taught me how to build without it. And now, sitting here in the home they never knew I was capable of owning, I don't feel bitter. I feel whole. I don't need them to clap for me. I don't need them to see me, because I see myself. I see the girl who once stayed late after school to avoid going home. The teenager who cried into her pillow when no one remembered her birthday. The young woman who ate dollar meals while working 2 jobs, never expecting a thank you. And I see the woman she became. The woman who no longer shrinks. The woman who no longer apologizes for taking up space. The woman who owns the land she walks on, not just with deeds and money, but with presence. because success without self-respect is a hollow trophy. And I didn't come this far to collect more hollow things. My life isn't perfect. I still carry scars. But now I carry them with pride, because every wound they left became a blueprint. Every slight became a tool. Their rejection built my resilience. Their mockery carved my independence. I didn't just survive their cruelty. I used it as fuel. And in the end, I didn't need to prove them wrong. I needed to prove myself right. That I was enough. That I always had been. That their inability to love me didn't make me unlovable. That their silence didn't mean I wasn't worthy of being heard. I built my life in secret not to spite them, but to protect it. To grow it in soil untouched by their doubt. And now, as the evening light fades and the garden lights glow beneath the olive trees, I can say something I never thought I would. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not trying to win anyone back. I'm not waiting for an apology that will never come, because I don't need it. Justice was served. But more than that, I found peace in choosing myself. Have you ever been mocked by family or friends only to prove them wrong later? Share your story. I'm listening.